Welcome! In this explainer, we're going to break down the core ideas of business ethics. We'll be looking at everything from the choices you make as an individual all the way up to the culture of the entire organization you might work for. So here's our game plan. We're going to start with you, how you as an individual make decisions. Then we'll kind of zoom out and see how the company you work for, its culture, its power structures, how all of that influences those very choices. And finally, we'll get into what happens when things go wrong and that critical choice everyone faces. Do you stay silent or do you speak up?
All right, let's just dive right in. We're going to kick things off with the most fundamental part of business ethics, you. More specifically, we're talking about the internal operating system you use every single day to decide what's right and what's wrong.
It seems like such a simple question, doesn't it? But, this is something philosophers have been debating for centuries. And all that debate has given us some really useful frameworks, different ways of thinking that can help guide us when we're faced with a tough ethical call.
So the formal term for all this is moral philosophy. But honestly, the best way to think about it is as your personal ethical operating system. Yeah, it's that set of principles kind of running in the background, guiding your actions, and helping you navigate those really tricky situations where the right path isn't obvious at all.
So when you boil it down, it really comes to this. When you're making a decision, what are you focused on? Are you all about the consequences? That's what we call a teleological approach. This is where you get ideas like utilitarianism, where the ends can justify the means. Or, do you focus on the rules and the duties involved? That's a deontological approach. For someone with this mindset, some actions are just plain right or wrong, and it doesn't matter what the outcome is.
Now, this is a fascinating framework from the psychologist Lawrence Kohlberg. He argued that our ethical thinking basically matures over time through these distinct stages. You can see we all start at stage 1, where right is pretty much just about avoiding getting in trouble. But as we develop, we move on to thinking about self-interest, then conforming to what others expect. By stage 4, it's about our duty to the social system. The final stages, 5 and 6, are where you get into really big ideas, like social contracts and ultimately universal ethical principles. We're talking about timeless concepts like justice and human rights that go way beyond any specific law or group. It's a journey, really, from what's in it for me to what is fundamentally right.
Okay, so just like individuals have this developing moral compass, organizations, they develop their own personality that ends up influencing everybody inside them. So let's zoom out and look at the environment you're in every day. We're talking about corporate culture, that invisible force. It's like the very air you breathe at work, and it shapes so much of your behavior.
So what is corporate culture, really? Well, it's essentially the personality of a company. It's all the unwritten rules, the shared beliefs about how we do things around here, and just the overall character of the organization that everyone can feel, even if they can't quite put it into words.
What's so cool about this slide is how it maps out culture on two really simple axes, concern for people and concern for performance. And that gives us these 4 very different corporate personalities. A company could be apathetic, just not caring about either. Or maybe it's exacting, super focused on performance, but not so much on people. The real goal for a lot of companies is to be integrative, like Starbucks, which is this constant balancing act between high performance and a high degree of care for people.
And here's the thing, a strong culture, whether it's good or bad, doesn't just sit there in the background. No, it actively shapes the behavior of every single person inside it through some really powerful forms of influence.
One of the biggest ideas here is something called differential association. And in simple terms, it just means you learn what's acceptable by watching who you work with. I mean, if your boss cut corners or your whole team does, you're way more likely to start seeing that behavior as normal, as just part of the job. And these right here, these are the tools, the levers, that leaders and even your colleagues use, sometimes without even realizing it, to influence your choices. It could be the promise of a bonus, the fear of getting written up, or even just the respect you have for a smart colleague. These forms of power are always in play, pushing you one way or the other, towards ethical or unethical actions. So what happens when an individual's own moral compass gets completely twisted by the company's culture? What's the result when a whole system starts rewarding bad behavior? Well, often it leads to this: white-collar crime. And this right here just brilliantly illustrates the staggering and often totally hidden impact of these decisions. We tend to focus on street crime, but the hard reality is that unethical choices made in boardrooms and offices cause way more financial and emotional damage.
Here's the thing. People who commit these crimes almost never see themselves as criminals. Nope. Instead, they tell themselves stories, right? Stories to make what they did seem okay. And these are the classic justifications. Things like, no one really got hurt, or come on, it's just standard practice. And these are the kinds of rationalizations that are often learned and even reinforced by the culture around them.
So, you find yourself facing some kind of wrongdoing at work. You've got a fundamental choice to make. You can become part of the problem, you can stay silent and just let it happen, or you can find a way to speak up.
And the type of company culture you're in really matters here. You have to ask, is your company's ethics program just compliance-based? Is it all about a rule book and avoiding lawsuits? Or is it values-based? Is it trying to build a real culture of trust and transparency that actually helps employees do the right thing, even when no one's watching and the rules aren't totally clear?
Now, when all the internal channels fail, employees sometimes turn to whistleblowing. This is a super high-stakes move, taking your concerns outside the company. It's a really difficult choice, but it's so important that there are now actual laws, like Sarbanes-Oxley and Dodd-Frank, that offer legal protection and even financial rewards for whistleblowers. This breakdown right here is incredibly revealing. It shows that in pretty much any organization, you've got about 10% of people who will take advantage of a situation for personal gain. You've got another 10% who will follow their own strong ethical code no matter what. But that huge majority, that's a full 80% of employees, they are influenced by the system around them. They'll either try to follow policy or, more likely, just go along with whatever their immediate work group is doing. And that is why corporate culture is probably the single most important factor in all of business ethics.
And that brings us right to the final big question. When you think about your own workplace and all the pressures you face, which of these groups do you naturally fall into? Are you leading the charge, just following the rules, or are you going with the flow? Answering that question for yourself, honestly, well, that's the real heart of business ethics.